and welcome to this first look exploring session, looking at some more Lord Mayor's shows. I say some more, we're running out. This is our penultimate session of the primary sort of texts of Lord Mayor's shows. We will have some more sessions going on where we look at some more eyewitnesses things and other civic pageantry and other sort of less definite materials, but for today we're looking at two pageants from 1635 and then, after a hop, skip and a jump, 1637. They are both by Thomas Heywood. It's Thomas Heywood's All the Way Down from now on, with the surviving text that we have within our dating period. We are sadly Tracy-less today. Normally our spirit guide is Professor Tracy Hill, but sadly not to be today. Has sent me a text giving us some additional notes, and we are, of course, as ever, guided by Tracy in paper form. We have not been endorsed or paid to demonstrate her book, Pageantry and Power: A Cultural History of the Early Modern Lord Mayor's Show, in any way. We just like doing that, mainly because actually it slightly embarrasses Tracy and we find it quite amusing. Without further ado, we're going to be diving into these two texts. Greg is on Google duties to try and give us some additional background, and we're both sort of flicking through the books that we have around us. So hopefully we're going to be able to fill some things in. Otherwise, the Lord Mayor's Show happens almost always on the 29th of October and is a procession, the primary part of which is processing along Cheapside between St Paul's and the Guildhall. But it all starts off the Guildhall, goes down to the river, goes off to Westminster, comes back again, and it's effectively a big circle. And I'll be throwing up a little map every so often just to remind you where things are supposed to be happening. Otherwise, we're going to just read through the texts as they have been printed, and we'll see how they go. Reading today, we have a wonderful room of people. Liza, introduce yourself to the wonderful people at home.
Hi, I'm Liza Graham, a professional person who never shuts up in London.
And Greg, introduce yourself, please.
I'm Greg, and by day I work for the NHS. By night I can be many things.
Eric, introduce yourself, please. Or not. You don't have to introduce yourself, Eric. You can just...
Sorry, I was too busy. Like, my camera blurred so much that, because at Greg's comment, but, it just, yeah. Hi, I'm Eric. I do things by day and by night. Mostly by night.
Excellent. Interestingly, for some reason, Eric, you come up as registering as being muted, and yet I heard you clear as a bell. Well, I don't know what strange voodoo powers you have, but they are strong. They are strong. He looks frozen. That's what I thought. Okay, Angela, introduce yourself, please.
Hello, I'm Angela. I'm a historian in London, and this is a step up for me doing the London pageant. I normally do much lower than this.
So, without further ado, we're going to dive into these texts. I'm going to pass parts around as we go. But I'm going to ask Liza if you can start us off with this first pageant from 1635. They're printed, we're not 100% certain precisely who they're printed for, produced to go with the pageants. And they open with a series of bump on their title page and usually a nice little dedication to the Lord Mayor or similar. So I'll ask Liza if you could read the introductory material and also the dedication by Thomas Heywood, please.
Londini, sinus, salutis, or London's harbour of health and happiness. Expressed in sundry triumphs, pageants, and shows at the initiation of the Right Honourable Christopher Clitheroe into the mayoralty of the far-renowned city, London. All the charges and expenses of this present ovation being the sole undertaking of the Right Worshipful Company of the Ironmongers. The 29th of October, Anno Salutis, 1635. Written by Thomas Heywood. Redeunt Spectacula. Printed at London by Robert Rayworth, 1635. To the right, Christopher Clitheroe. to the Right Honourable Christopher Clitheroe, Lord Mayor of this... Sorry, inhaled a cat hair. Never have cats. I mean, always have cats, but... Anyway. To the Right Honourable Christopher Clitheroe, Lord Mayor of this renowned metropolis, London. Right Honourable, it is one of Erasmus his undeniable apothegms that there is no city can be so strongly immured or defenced, but may be either by engines defaced, by enemies invaded, or by treason surprised. But the counsels and decrees of a wise magistrate are inexpugnable. Time and your merit have called you to this office and honour. As all eyes are upon you, so all hearts are towards you. Never was any more freely voiced in his election, and therefore none more hopeful in expectation. Your ability and what you can do is known. Your purpose, what you intend, you have amply delivered. Only the performance remains, in which there is no question but that you will accommodate all your future proceedings to these 3 heads: pro rege, pro lege, pro grege. For as you are a magistrate, so you are a judge, a calling both of trust and trouble. Of trust, because all such as sit in judicature are persons ordained by God, to examine causes discreetly, hear both parties considerately, and censure all manners impartially. For justice is the badge of virtue, the staff of peace, and the maintenance of honour. Of trouble, because in no part of your time, during your regency, neither in public or private, foreign or domestic things, whether you meditate alone or converse with others, you shall find the least vacancy. Which remembers me of that which Dion witnesseth of one Similis, who, living long in great place and authority under the Emperor Hadrian, after much entreaty got leave to retire himself into the country, where, after 7 contented years expiring, he caused this epitaph to be ensculped upon his tomb. Similis hic jacet, cuius aetas multorum sunt annorum, septem tamen duntaxat, annos vixit. Lactantius further teaches us that it is most requisite in all such as have their charge in commonweal under their prince and governor, so to know the bounds of their calling and understand the full effects of their duty, that by executing justice they may be feared, and by showing mercy beloved. I conclude all in this short sentence: non quid ipsi velis sed quod lex et religio cogat cogita. Ever submitting myself to your better judgment and remaining to your lordship most obsequious, Thomas Heywood.
Thus ends the obsequiousness of Thomas Heywood. Yes, he likes to quote people. Lactantius is not one I'm particularly familiar with, I have to say. It's Erasmus. That's fairly straightforward. That's one the average person might remember, but. Yes, he's demonstrating his learning again, isn't he? In a reasonable obsequious fashion. Yes, so it is the 29th of October, because it's almost always the 29th of October, 1635. We have a new mayor, Christopher Clitheroe, and it's the Ironmongers. And this would normally be my cue to cue in Tracy to tell us something about the Ironmongers and this particular Lord Mayor. I don't know if Greg's managed to do any Googling to find anything particularly exciting to state at this time. It isn't our primary aim for these sessions, so it's not the end of the world. Any thoughts briefly on this before we go into our first pageants and other material? Angela?
I'm sure we all remember Heywood saying, if you don't know what I'm saying, just read a book. And I noticed that he's now given up even giving the translations. He used to give the translations of his quotations, but now he's not even doing that, which is interesting because he got dumped last year.
Yeah. Yes, that is true. Our last session, it was not a Heywood, and we were quite pleased. Actually, it was somebody else who we really enjoyed. Had a nice bounce to its step that last session did. Any other thoughts before we get into actually some meat we can digest? Okay, what I'm going to ask is, Angela, if I could ask you to read the next couple of paragraphs, the opening throat clearance. Greg, if you can read the description of the first show by water, Eric, could you be Venus? And
I can try.
and we'll just pause there before we dive any further on. We'll just see if I think that's it's a reasonable place to briefly pause. So yes, let's have some throat clearing and some description of the first show by water. The first show by water will be they'll have travelled down from the Guildhall down to the water's edge of the Thames, around about 3 cranes, and I'll throw a map up when we get to the first show by water, so you can have a sense of where this procession is. Anyway, Angela, take it away.
I shall not need to borrow my induction from the antiquity of this famous metropolis, nor to enter into a large discourse of the noble magistracy and government thereof, being arguments already granted, and therefore unnecessary to be disputed. And yet I hold it not altogether impertinent to remember some few things of remark which have happened in the praetorships of the Right Honourable the Lord Mayors of this renowned city, who have been free of the right worshipful company of the ironmongers. In the year 1409, Richard Marlowe of the same fraternity, bearing the sword, there was a show presented by the parish clerks of London at a place called Skinner's Well, and now Clerkenwell, which was the matter from the creation of the world, and lasted for the space of 8 entire days. Edward IV, then king, being present with his queen and the greatest part of his nobility, which Richard Marlowe was after inaugurated into the same honour, anno 1417. In the year 1566, Sir Christopher Draper being Lord Mayor, King James of late and most sacred memory, was born on the 6th day of June, anno 1569. In Sir Alexander Avenon's mayoralty was the suppression of the rebels of the North, anno 1581. Sir Francis Hervey being mayor was the French monsieurs coming over into England and his royal entertainment by Queen Elizabeth, anno 1607. Sir Thomas Campbell being invested into the same honour, all the like shows and triumphs belonging unto the solemnity of this day, which for some years had been omitted and neglected, were by a special commandment from His Majesty King James again retained, and have been till this present day continued, whom since hath succeeded in the same honour Sir James Campbell, his son, a worthy senator of this city, yet living, the last of this worthy and worshipful company who hath sat in that seat of justice. Now this day, succeeded by the Right Honourable Christopher Clitheroe. But I leave all circumstances and come to the shows, now in present agitation.
The first show, oh dear, the first show by water is an artificial model, partly fashioned like a rock, and beautified with sundry varieties and rarities, in which all art in imitating striveth to exceed nature. The decorments that adorn the structure I omit, and descend to the persons that furnish it, which are the 3 celestial goddesses, Juno, Pallas, Venus. Juno, Pallas, Venus. In Juno is figured power and state. In Pallas or Minerva, arms and arts. In Venus, beauty and love. The first best known by her peacocks, the second by her owls, the third by her swans and turtles, who is also attended by her son Cupid, in whom is emblemed love, by whom some have thought the universe to have been created because of this beauty, glory, and flourishing form thereof, as also that love, though pictured young, yet in age exceeds all things. But Venus, because born of the seas, I hold most proper to speak upon the waters. These 3 goddesses are sent from Jupiter, with several presents to honour this day's triumphs, and to him whom they are devoted. Juno brings power, Pallas wisdom, and Venus love, whose speech is as followeth.
The 3 celestial goddesses this day descend, grave praetor, to prepare your way to your new oath and honor. Love, whose station is still above, hath sent to this ovation and glorious triumph us. Do you know the great and potent queen who to your dural seat brings state and power? Pallas, who from love's brain derives herself, and from the highest strain of all the other gods claims her descent, her divine wisdom doth this day present. But I, emergent Venus, love's fair queen, born of the seas, and therefore best beseen to speak upon the waters, bring a gift prized equally with theirs, that which shall lift you up on voyambuses, and from the low frame of sordid earth give you above a name. From just affections and pure thoughts, love springs, and these are impt with no Icarian wings, but plumes immortal, such as angels bear, to fix your name in an eternal sphere, which to attain, take Juno for your guide. Maintain her peacocks, not her pride, who to prove all earth's glory is but vain, looks but upon her feet, and flags her train. Observe next Pallas's owls, and from them take this notion. You must watch even as they wake, for all such as the management of state shall undergo, rise early and bed late. So wisdom is begot, from wisdom love, sweet child of such a parent may then prove, as this day you do attract the eyes and expectation of the great and wise. So in the happy progress of your year, you may their hearts and souls to you endear. From love your water's passage understand, but power and wisdom welcomes you on land.
And we'll pause there. Yeah, there's a line there where, the decorments that adorn the structure, I omit. Thank you, Heywood. Thanks for that. Yeah, you could have described them. You could have given us some sense of what this looked like. Nope, he's not going to tell us. There's an artificial model, partly fashioned like a rock, beautified with sundry varieties and rarities. Nice and specific. We like that. Yeah, helpful. There are at least some people on it, and we know who they are. Juno, Pallas, Venus, Cupid's about. There's peacocks, owls. I'm liking owls. I'm not sure how many owls we've had. Swans and turtle doves, I'm assuming, rather than your actual turtles. It's always turtle doves. Though I'd quite like the idea of just this massive tortoise. That would amuse me. Swans and tortoises, yeah. Explicating the vision before them. Observe Pallas owls. Juno maintains her peacock's riches. It's a nice, straightforward opener, but lacking in detail. Any thoughts on the room? Yeah, Liza.
Well, Greg had a really good thought. Greg was saying that the gifts they offered Clitheroe mirror the gifts that these three goddesses offered Paris. These being the three goddesses who participated in the judgment of Paris. There was a golden apple. For some reason, they all wanted it. It said, to the most beautiful. They chose maybe the least qualified man in the universe and they each tried to bribe him with something, but Paris was a hoe. He went for beauty rather than riches or intelligence. Tune in next week for Greek Myth Hour with Liza.
Or you can watch our video takedown on the arraignment of Paris, which covers very much these themes. Any more, Liza?
Well, just that drawing a parallel with the judgment of Paris might not be the greatest political omen in the world, considering how that ended up.
Yeah, that's fine. It's fine. Choose wisely. Perhaps that's the thing. Look at the things. Look at the owls. Look at the owls. Yeah. Okay, any other thoughts? This is the water show. It may end up on the land again at some point later on.
It did sound like the mountain we seem to get every year.
Yeah, as I say, I'm fairly convinced that there are effectively stock structures that get redressed and reworked, and then specific things for each pageant that gets a top-down reworking. That does seem like it contains multitudes of possible things that we've already had before. Eric?
I know I read it, but I still don't really know what the point of that speech was for Venus. It was just like, "Hey, I'm here, and I bring my girlfriends, and we came to visit you, because like the because we were sent by Jove, or which I misread apparently as love." Oops.
No, well, that's, to be fair, the J was down as an I think, as a capital I. Yeah, well, you're explicating the image that's in front of them. I don't quite know why this is the example used. I think that's I think I'm with Liza on this point of going, well, it's about. I'm sure it looks good. We've no idea what it looks like because he's decided not to tell us. Still cross about that. Okay. Few hundred years past. Let it go. So we're going to go to some of the other models, and it's described as models this time. Have we had model as a term before? Don't think we have. But that's interesting. Okay, so the next model's by land. I'll ask Liza to read the description of that. And then Greg, if you could do the next speech coming up. And then Eric, if you can read the next bit of the short paragraph, the third platform. And I'll read the fourth, and then we'll pause, I think. That seems like a plan. Yeah, and then we'll come back. Okay. Liza, take it away. The next bottle. Oh, Eric.
I had a thought while I was looking up something else, as per usual. This is the Ironmongers, the pageant, right? Show, Lord Mayor's show. And, well, because I'm so eloquent, the Venus is Vulcan's wife, right?
That is true,
maybe
yes.
That's how they kind of ended up with Venus in there, but then not really.
Wrong Vulcan.
Liza showing off her
Venus and her girlfriends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they hated each other. I mean,
it wasn't a really good relationship, it has to be said, between Vulcan and Venus. So yeah, maybe there'll be more of that. We've had some fun stuff with ironworks before, so maybe we will get more. Anyway, Liza, could you take it away, please?
The next model by land, which was only shown upon the water, is one of the 12 celestial signs, Sagittarius, called Croton. He, Sagittarius, before he was translated into the heavens, was said to be the son of Pan and the nymph Euphemes, and in his infancy was conclacteus musarum. He sucked of the same breast with the Muses, his mother being their nurse, and dwelt in Helicon. He was famous for his skill in archery, wondrous swift of foot, and when the 9 sisters sung to their several instruments of music, his custom was to dance before them in sundry active figures and postures, for which and other endowments known to be eminent in, he was at their request to Jupiter translated amongst the stars, in the platform on which he is born. At the 4 corners are seated 4 other dignified with the like constellations: Virgo, best known by the name of Astrea and Justa, the daughter of Jupiter, and Themis, and for her justice and integrity thither transferred and numbered amongst the 12. Next, Ariadne, best known among the astrologians, by the name of Corona, the crown, which was said to be forged by Vulcan in Lemnos. The materials thereof were gold and Indian gems of extraordinary splendor, which she, lending to Theseus at that time when her father Minos had exposed him to the Minotaur, by the lustre thereof he passed freely through the darkness of the labyrinth. Some say it was first given to her by Liber Pater, or Bacchus, the son of Jupiter and Semele, and was the price of her virginity. But howsoever, she being most ingratefully forsaken by Theseus in the isle of Naxos, was there found by Bacchus, who, having espoused her with great solemnity, caused her, after her death, with this crown to be invested in the firmament. The third Cassiopeia, the wife of Cepheus, who, preferring her own beauty before the Nereids, who were the daughters of Neptune, was for that insolence doomed to be bound in a chair, hand in foot, and so placed among the stars, where she remains conspicuous in 13 stars. The fourth is Andromeda, the daughter of Cepheus and Cassiopeia, who, by the wrath of Neptune, being chained to a rock and ready to be devoured by a sea monster, was delivered thence by Perseus, the son of Jupiter, and Danae, to whom, being after married, was called Persa, and stellified by Minerva. The speaker is an astrologian. The speech followeth.
Late risen in the heaven is Sagittary. With you, great Lord, who doth about him carry 15 bright stars most influent, and these all appearing in the circle him all. His bow divided in that beaten road called Galaxia, where the gods have trod so oft that look upon it in the night, when all the rest's dull, that alone shines bright. As you now at this instant, his 15 stars, did I say? How you then, who between your landing and repose by power divine, have full 60 about your state to shine. For every company's a star this day, visible to all, and over these you sway. But 12 in chief, and those we must confess, a greater lustre made to guide the less. All enjoy one like freedom, all are free, all enjoy one like, and all great praetor to be ruled by thee, commanding all the rest who in thy sphere now rising art to shine a complete year. You may observe his bow still ready bent, in which there is a perfect emblem meant of divine justice. The arrow with the star headed implies that her power reacheth far, and no opposier, fraud, violence, or rape can, when she aims to strike, her vengeance scape. Yet, though the string be drawn up to his ear, as always pressed, he rather seems with fear to threat than punish, and though he can still let loose his shafts, he seldom shoots to kill. Observe it well, the moral doth imply all justice should be mixed with lenity. So imitate the gods, since them we know, apt still to mercy, but to vengeance slow. And the celestial bodies, though they trade above, yet were for our example made. As oft as man sins, should love punish vice, his quiver would be emptied in a trice, and mankind at once perish. Oh, mix then mercy with justice, interweave again justice with mercy. So shall you in your state not stars alone, but the gods imitate. So shall your Tellene body in the end all the celestial bodies far transcend, and decked with better lights than those you see above the spheres, shine to eternity.
The third platform is contrived only for pastime, to please the vulgar, and therefore deserves no further character than a plain nomination, as devised only to please the eye, but no way to feast the ear, and so I leave it to proceed to the next.
And yes, actually, I'm going to pause there. So yes, once again, platform number 3 is unknown. Heywood refuses to tell us what it looks like because he does the words and lengthy explication. I mean, I think we can. We've been here before. I don't think we need to say anything more about Heywood's hatred of people.
He really hates these, doesn't he?
He absolutely he refuses point blank to describe it every time.
Do you? I would love to sit in on the planning sessions where he argued with the Christmas brothers, or whoever was in charge of the design.
Yeah, indeed, the Christmas brothers. Yes, Angela.
Well, I mean, I'm really struck by his limited visual sense. That's what we're getting, isn't it? That he really isn't that interested in the visual. So, I mean, I wonder if in those discussions actually just said, yeah, whatever you think. you know,
Yeah.
because he's only interested in the learning and the words and so on. It's fascinating. And his whole response to, you know, a vulgar audience who are only interested in the visual, not in sound, it's remarkable.
Yeah. And it, you know, and then we get this sort of, you know, we've had so many words preceding the speech by this astrologian, of which I don't think they described anything at all about what's happening. You know, we get this helpful phrase, the next model by land, which was only shown upon the water. So where was it? So it's not a land. If it's, is it on the water? Or is it? I'm getting quite annoyed. I don't normally get annoyed, but Heywood is really starting to annoy me. I don't know what this is apart from there's a speech. I mean, he's gone through so much detail about the background of this. And did anyone get any description anywhere of what this pageant is supposed to look like? Did the speech even hint at anything? There's an emblem, arrow. I've got nothing there really there to go on. We've had more than this before. I mean, he usually gives us some outline. But he really isn't interested in. He's just you know, the first show by water, the first show, was you know, we got some sense of what it looked like, but not a lot. This, we got nothing. Unless I'm just exaggerating and I just wasn't paying enough attention. That does happen, by the way. Okay, well, if nobody else noticed anything, we kind of have to move on because there's nothing more to say. The fourth model is suitably compendious in its detail. So what we'll do is I'll ask Liza actually if you could read the first shortish paragraph, then Angela if you could read the next, and then Eric you can be Mars this time I think.
So are you saying I had sex with myself? Is that it, or what?
That's exactly what we're all saying, yes.
I'm actually going to go on the record and say that's really not what we're saying. No.
And then you got caught in a net.
I mean, where's this happened anyway?
Okay, I'm just called to order. Let's do the fourth model. There's the third platform which we don't know, and now we're going to the fourth model. Liza, give us the introductory paragraph for that.
The fourth model is a castle munified with sundry pieces of ordnance, and accommodated with all such persons as are needful for the defence of such a citadel, the gunner being ready to give fire upon all occasions. As for the curious art in the contriving thereof, I make no question but the work itself is sufficiently able to commend the workman, being known to be an excellent artist, of which the spectators may best censure. I will only deliver unto you a word or two concerning the presenter, which is Mars.
He is styled the third among the gods because he stands in that degree amongst the planets, and is said to be the son of Jupiter. Some write that Bellona was his nurse, other that she was his mother, and some his sister. Yet none of these improper, for Enio, which is a Bellona, implies no more than an encouragement of the mind to hardiness and valour in all skirmishes and battles. He is also called Ares, which signifieth damage or detritionment, and mavers quasi mares vorans, of devouring of men, and by the Gentiles had the denomination of the god of battles. He was offensive and defensive. Upon his head a plumed helmet, his sword mounted upon his thigh. He held in one hand a whip, in the other the rein, being drawn in his chariot by wild and untamed horses. Before him was portrayed a wolf devouring a lamb, the wolf being the beast particularly offered upon his shrine. because the two Roman twins, the first founders of Rome, Romulus and Remus, were feigned to be the sons of Mars, of which the one slew the other. Therefore, Romulus is figured upon his chariot as the unnatural survivor. The Athenians were the first that ever sacrificed to this god of war, which celebration was called Ekaton, Pephomena, for whosoever had slain 100 of the public enemies was bound to sacrifice a man upon his altar, situated in the Isle of Lemnos. But after the bloodiness and inhumanity thereof displeasing the Athenians, they changed that custom, and in the stead of man offered a gelded hog, which they called Nephrendes. Varro writes that amongst the Romans, Cineas Dentatus, having fought 110 several duels and being victor in them all, received 45 wounds, whose scars were visible upon his body, all before and none backward. He was for his valour honoured with 25 several crowns, and received, moreover, 140 golden bracelets, and was first amongst the Romans that ever made oblation to this deity. Mars, sitting in the front of the tower, speaks as followeth. The speech of Mars.
Vilipotent Mars is from his sphere come down to heighten these great triumphs of renown, seated in this mured citadel defenced with bullets wrapped in fire and clouds condensed. The tormentary art, not long since found, which shatters towers and by which ships are drowned, I bring along to let you understand these guard you safely, both by sea and land. Oh, when I late saw from mine orb divine so many sons of Mars amongst you shine in complete arms, plumed casques and ensigns spread, by such brave captains and commanders led, no soldier but his posture to the life, acting to the music of the drum and fife. Some practicing small bombards, some the great, whose very thunder roused me from my seat. This peaceful city I much praised, whose power could to a camp itself change in an hour. Proceed in your brave practice, whilst I tell wherein your iron and steel doth most excel. Without these metals, nature could produce nothing that is conducible to man's use. The plough, without the coulter and the share, could make no furrows, and those grains that are upon them thrown were lost to them that sow them, without the sickle or the scythe to mow them. The gardener's art would cease to be a trade, if take from him the mattock and the spade. In dens and capes we should be forced to dwell, were no axes made to the timber fell. Nor on the seas could we have ships to sail, without the saw or the hammer and the nail. Ask those that take in angling most delight, without baited hook no fish will bite. The iron crow turns up the Indian mold, trenching the earth until they dig out gold. If with the iron the adamant should contend, there should be no mere compass, but an end of all discovery. Even the horse we ride, unshod, would founder. Who takes greatest pride when the most curbed, and playing with the bit, he snows the ground, and doth the spur forget. There is no art, craft, faculty, or trade without it can subsist. Our sword is made of these mixed metals. Sir, justice would cease, if, as in war, it were not used in peace. Power makes it yours. Your wisdom now direct you, while peace stays here, Mars shall abroad protect you.
This speech being ended, the ordnance goeth off from the castle. Bang. So we get a bit of detail here. We've got enough to potentially pull it apart. So we've got a castle. There's a castle. There's all the people that you need to defend a castle, one of which is a gunner. There's a gun. Mars, meanwhile, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say he is literally in a chariot in front of that. That seemed to be intimated by what he's talking about in the speech. It's also mentioned here about the anciently figured and angry man sitting in a chariot. I don't know how literal that is. That could be the emblem element there. I'm quite keen on there being a wolf devouring a lamb as a sort of semi-animated figure. I'm going on a limb here because he's giving us so little. But Even the horse we ride unshod would founder. So maybe he's he's actually on a horse. I don't know. I don't know where Mars is. He says sitting in front of the tower, but I just wonder whether there's more going on here. Is it as static as he's just sitting in front of the tower, and then a gun goes off? Is it as simple as that? I'm really clutching at straws here, people. So please contradict me. I'm trying to pick something out of this. Angela, please save me.
Is this why? Is this I mean, I think this is what he wants. He just wants somebody to orate. That's it. That's why. His third platform, contrived for pastime, irritates the hell out of him every time, because he does. He's expecting everybody to stand silent while these speeches happen. It's and they relate not at all to anything that they're sat on or anything. It's kind of I think this one is more like that than any of the others that I've seen. I don't know what other people think.
Eric.
I was going to say it's kind of weird to have Mars talking about peace in such a positive manner. You'd expect him to go, "Let's start a war," or some kind of thing like that. But then I don't know what the context is it's in, because I remember there was some wasn't there some trouble / rebellion / I don't know, something else.
Not yet.
Well, maybe it was brewing. I don't know. It just seems kind of strange.
There's a lot of literature on that particular question. Anyway, in general, we now think not yet.
But otherwise, I mean, what's quite nice about the speech, okay, I'm going to rein it in now, is, we're back to something we haven't really had quite so explicitly for a while, of just, iron's great! The kind of advertising quality of how wonderful our works are. We haven't really had that explicit level of advert for a few years. A few years back we had some really, really fun ones. And even further back we've had some really explicit ones. But I don't think we've really gone for it as much. Or am I, again, just having a short-term memory thing?
There was one, Alex was with us, and it was Iron before, wasn't it? And there was like a whole song. It was kind of big time.
Yeah. So yeah, you get the impression perhaps the ironmongers really do, whenever they get to do it, they say, right, okay, we want a proper advert in, okay, because we're paying for this. So get us a bit of good advertising in. Last time ironmongers, I think, was a Decca one.
Yeah, it was the one with the Thwickathwack song. Yeah, I really hope we get. I hope we get a song in this one.
Yeah, I don't think we will.
God damn it! Bring back the Thwickathwack song.
I'm afraid Decca is suffering from a certain level of death at this time too. It's just slightly beyond writing as another Thwickathwack. Assuming that he did write it, it's probably a adjustment of another. Eric.
I was gonna say a thing, and now it sounded semi not coherent, but now I don't know what it is. I was just gonna say that it's interesting how it feels like this sort of speech about by Mars about peace and all that stuff is kind of that thing of, hey, we're gonna have a war just sort of to preserve peace, which is kind of as we've learned by virtue of all the wars that have happened historically and that we know of, never works.
Yes, that thing of my power is pointed outwards, so which fits with the image of the tower with its cannons firing outwards. If we go back 50 odd plus years, in Faustus you have this whole thing of making our city surrounded by walls of brass, the walls of cannon to protect you. So there's a bit of that in there. Anyway, we need to do the fifth sequence, and I'm going to suggest we go around the room. Angela, I'm going to ask you to be the magistrate later on. So there's a speech coming up, but I'm going to ask everybody else to sort of rotate round. So I'll ask Greg to go first, then Liza, then Eric, and rotate around until we get to Angela, who will do the speech that is in verse. But we've got quite a lot of prose to get through. So I'll ask Greg if you can go from after the ordnance goeth off from the castle, if you can ignore going off, and go on to the fifth and last. I went off before you.
And now I come to the fifth and last. Here I might enter into a large discourse concerning the commodiousness of iron and steel, and speak of Tubal-Cain, who made the first forge and found out the use of these metals, as also Vulcan, the deified smith, and of his cyclopean hammers, with which he was said to have beaten out love's thunderbolts, and other fictions to the like purpose, these having before being exposed to the public view upon occasion of the like solemnity, and knowing withal that Cibus his coctus relisheth not the queasy stomachs of these times, I therefore purposely omit them, proceeding to the last pageant, styled sinus salutis, first the bosom or harbour of health and happiness, the sculpture being adorned with 8 several persons representing such virtues as are necessary to be embraced by all such magistrates, who after their stormy and tempestuous progress through all judicature cause these incidents their places, seek to anchor in that safe and secure port so styled.
And Liza, take up the mantle, please. Paragraph each. Rotate it round.
Every magistrate is a minister under God, appointed by his divine ordinance to that calling, to be a protector of the church, a preserver of discipline and peace, consonant with his laws, the laws of nature and the land, which he ought faithfully to execute, with corporal punishment correcting the proud and disobedient, and against all unjust oppressors defending the conformable and humble. The first virtue adorning the structure is styled fortitudo togata, which gowned fortitude is thus defined.
A constancy of mind, persevering in honest purpose, rightly undertaken, and according to his place and calling, tolerating private injuries for laudable causes, despising pleasures, corrupt gifts, detraction, and the like, and these merely for virtue's sake and preserving the public good before his own gain, and so on, of which Fabricius was a noble president, who, refusing the gold sent him by Pyrrhus, was no whit affrighted with the terror of his elephants, to speak or act anything against the dignity of the republic, of whom Eutropius reports Pyrrhus to have said, "The sun is more easy to be altered in his course than this Fabricius to be removed from his honesty."
Mansuetudo, or gentleness, is a virtue mediating wrath and suppressing all desire of revenge and remitting offences for public concord's sake, which notably appeared in Pericles, who, when one had bitterly rallied on him for space of one whole afternoon in the open marketplace, night coming, he caused his servants to light him to his horse with torches.
Candor, or sincerity, is when without simulation we ourselves speak, and with no diffidence suspect the good meaning of others, wishing all just men well, rejoicing at their prosperity, and commiserating their disaster. It is reported of Trajan the emperor that when Sura Licinius, one of the tribunes, was so accused unto him to have insidiated his life, not questioning the faith of so known a friend, the same night, uninvited, supped with him privately in his house, and the table being withdrawn, trusted himself to be trimmed by Sura's barber.
Paciencia philosophica is a virtue obedient unto reason, paciencia in bearing wrongs and suffering adversities. It moderates grief, bridles nature, so that it never rebels against justice, modesty, constancy, or any other virtue. Xenophon reports Cyrus and Agesilaus to be of such philosophical patience that in their height of determination in all their actions and speech, they appeared to all men affable and offenceless.
Placibility is a virtue having correspondence with that which I styled before mansuetudo, or gentleness. Philosoukia, or study of peace and concord, is when a magistrate thinks humbly of himself, moderating his own anger and bearing with the infirmities of others, pardoning injuries and maintaining unity, being provident that all unnecessary controversy be atoned, lest the public peace and the unity of the church or commonweal be disturbed or hindered. Of which virtue Abraham was a most imitable president, who, though in authority, wisdom, and age he had priority before Lot, yet notwithstanding gave place to him only for concord's sake.
Humanity, which the Greeks call ethos, is justice, coupled with gentleness, equity, upright life, affability, and the like, for which are remarked Alexander, Cyrus, Octavius Caesar, etc. It hath also been observed amongst scholars, in which number I may catalogue your lordship, that the more learned they have been, they have showed themselves the more humane and humble.
The last is nemesis, or zeal, which is an ardent love of God's glory, of justice, piety, sanctity, etc., with an earnest indignation against whatsoever is evil, supporting the religious and severely punishing the wicked and refractory. Fine is zelo inflammatus cafodit scortatorum, etc., so much to illustrate the persons. I come now to the speech.
He that is called to be a magistrate, a guide, a ruler, or a candidate must of so great a burden know the weight, but first the steps that mount him to that height. Shall I direct you then what sail to bear, like a good pilot, and what course to steer? Your pardon, great sir, daring to descry a passage which you know better than I. There is a double fortitude, both crowned with merited palm, one gunned, the other gowned. The soldier claims the first as his by due, the next the civil sword, now borne by you, by which as great a glory you shall win in peace as he in war, by curbing sin and cherishing virtue. In the second place stands gentleness and mercy. Oh, what grace hath peace and with pity mixed. Metals best feel when iron is well incorporate with steel. A body so calcined to public use as to support right and suppress abuse. Sincerity may challenge the third class. Next, patience, which by suffering doth surpass all other virtues. Placability, study of concord, and fidelity. Last, holy zeal, and that doth crown the rest. All these being harboured in your honoured breast, shall Morgus shelves and rocks your passage clear, and bring you to the port to which you steer. You are the city's chief, the prime, the soul in expectation, like the steadfast pole. Prove constant in your course, be still the same, so let your sword, touched with truth's adamant, aim in your year's compass, that to all men's view, skillful in steerage, it may still go true. So those that were before you and ruled well, equal you shall, although not anti-sell.
So we'll just pause there before we do the final speech at the end. So we got 8 figures, 8 several persons representing such virtues that are as are necessary to embraced by all such magistrates. So we get a fair amount of background for each of them. One of them at least is a bit like an earlier one, so I won't describe it very much. That sort of wonderful moment there, because I went through them on it, going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's the other one, right? Who is speaking this speech? It's not one of those virtues. The speaker is separate from the virtues. But I don't know who the speaker is. Did I miss that? Because he's talking to a magistrate, so I thought for a moment it might be a magistrate, but maybe it is a magistrate, and I'm overthinking this. And And he doesn't enter into a large discourse concerning the commodiousness of iron and steel. He does a bit, but he doesn't. So that's fine. Yeah, but swords and the best metals that are available, mix all these together, you'll get a wonderfully strong sword of you're going to be a great... That's how to be a great magistrate. Strong and true. The speeches themselves are working. I'm liking the speeches on the whole. But the rest of the text.
Needs more songs. Needs at least a little bit of tetrameter.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm good with that. Other thoughts on this fifth thing with 8 people in it?
I'm finding it remarkably impersonal. The whole thing. It's kind of like, it could be anywhere. Could be anywhere and for anyone. It doesn't... I mean, obviously it does mention iron occasionally. Yeah,
it's feeling guild specific. I don't know whether it's particularly pointedly for the individual in the way that some of the past have been. You know, when they really play on his on the names. Okay, let's. So that's the various pageants that were presumably performed along Cheapside. The Lord Mayor then goes to the Guildhall, has a slap-up meal, and they then saunter along to St Paul's. There's a bit of a service, and then he heads off home at night. And usually, what they do is they line up a selection of the pageants outside his house, if possible, or on the way from the Guildhall to St Paul's again. But anyway, they do tend to do something when he's trying to get home to bed. You know, he's got his key in the lock, and then suddenly a speech occurs. I'm exaggerating for comic effect. Anyway, there remains the speech at night, which is only a summary or reiteration of the former shows, applied to the taking leave of his lordship and to commend him to his rest. Mars being the speaker. So, Eric, if you could reprise your Mars, please.
Sorry, I'm not drooling about Mars bars.
Yes, I would not bar your return as Mars.
The speech, Night by Mars, as we've said. Phoebus his steeds hath stabled in the west, and night, succeeding day, invites to rest. The 3 celestial queens sent from above, leaving with you their power, their wisdom, love. Now take their leaves. The centaur doth bestow on you his justice with his shaft and bow, who to your best repose bequeaths you here to mount himself again into his sphere. The night being come, he cannot well be missed, for without him his orb cannot subsist. Neither can mine, now must my star display its luminous rays, being borrowed thence this day, to wait upon your triumphs, and shall still protect you. And, wait, what? Protect you? Okay. Sorry, I lost my place. Oh, yeah. Shall still protect you, and your weighty charge, until he, which shall all your upright actions bless, conduct you to your port of happiness.
These frames, models, and structures were fashioned, wrought, and perfected by the 2 artists, John and Matthias Christmas, successors to their father, Mr. Gerald Christmas, late deceased, as well in the exquisite performance of his quality as in his true sincerity and honesty, of whom I may confidently speak, as no man could outvie him in these works which he underwent, so none could outmatch him in his word. For anything he undertook, concerning whom I make no scruple, thus ingeniously to conclude, ars patris in filius etiam post fata viget finis. Okay. Any final thoughts for 1635? It's been a bit of a slog.
It has. I mean, it's perfectly okay. It reads as though it's very by the numbers. I did like the speech, Mars's speech about iron. I think for me that was the highlight of the speeches. Venus was nice too, of course. Yeah, it's hard to choose between two gods without offending either one or the other.
Or in fact, all the others. You know, their gods are jealous that way.
I'm just going to shut up now then.
Yeah, don't anger the gods. Don't anger the gods. It's not worth it. No, I think there is an element that if we actually trimmed back all the commodiousnesses, then and we just focused on the speeches, we would have had a much more pleasant time. I think there is a certain problem with these texts. They're not really performance texts.
Yep.
In that sense, so whereas some of the earlier ones, you've got a bit of backbiting and a bit of point scoring, as well as describing the event that this is for, and these documents increasingly with Heywood are not doing that. It's not just that he doesn't do it; it seems to be getting worse as the years go by.
Yeah, that's right. I think that's absolutely right. He's just becoming more and more a words only person.
Eric,
I'm just wondering if there's a reference to like a lunar eclipse here, because like unless it's just me misreading the text, because he goes, Mars goes, now must my star display its luminous rays. And there's a part of me going, lunar eclipses can happen if Mars passes in front of or behind the moon. I can't remember the order, but anyway, reflect, between the moon and the sun, basically. I don't know if that's me.
It would be a transit, but not an eclipse.
Yeah, something like that. But it's like, yeah.
Right, I feel we're going to move on from 1635. We're going to jump to 1636. There is no show that we know of. Tracy, who sadly couldn't be with us tonight, has sent me a text message. P.S. 1636 was a bad plague year. Emoji with a mask on. So that's all we've got really to say there. And we're gonna basically leapfrog over 1636. It was the fishmongers apparently, and the Lord Mayor was Edward Broomfield. So.
Well, that's a shame, because the last time there were fishmongers, they actually threw fish, didn't they, to people in the crowd?
Indeed.
Really excellent.
You got free fish. So sadly, no fish. But we are going to jump to 1637, and it's the haberdashers. We haven't had haberdashers for a few years now, 5 years since haberdashers. So in reasonably living memory, I can't remember precisely whether there was anything exciting about the haberdashers. We've had them a few times in the last 10 years. So, or would have done, at least on some years. There's the odd gap. So Liza appears to be attacking invisible objects. So
They're visible to me.
Oh, of course they are. Liza's playing Pokemon Go, and so there's a whole selection of creatures in the house. You go round and find them. I'm going to stop now. Liza, could I ask you to read the opening material, as is our wont, for 1637, please?
Londini speculum, or London's mirror, expressed in sundry triumphs, pageants, and shows at the initiation of the Right Honourable Richard Fenn into the mayoralty of the famous and far-renowned city, London. All the charge and expense of these laborious projects, both by water and land, being the sole undertaking of the Right Worshipful Company of the Haberdashers, written by Thomas Heywood, imprinted at London by I. Oakes, or possibly J. Oakes, dwelling in Little St. Bartholomew's, 1637. To the Right Honourable Richard Fenn, Lord Mayor of this renowned metropolis, London, Right Honourable, excuse, I entreat, this my boldness, which proceedeth rather from custom in others than curiosity in myself, in presuming to prompt your memory in some things tending to the greatness of your high place and calling. You are now entered into one of the most famous mayoralties of the Christian world. You are also called fathers, patrons of the afflicted and procurators of the public good. And whatsoever hath reference to the true consideration of justice and mercy may be analogically conferred upon pious and just magistrates. And for the antiquity of your yearly government, I read the Athenians elected theirs annually, and for no longer continuance. So of the Carthaginians, the Thebans, and etc. And the Roman Senate held that continued magistracy was in some respects unprofitable to the weal public, against which there was an act in the laws of the 12 Tables. And it is thus concluded by the learned that the dominion of the greatest magistrates, which are kings and princes, ought to be perpetual, but of the less, which be praetors, censors, and the like, only ambulatory and annual. I conclude with that saying of a wise man, prime officers ought to rule by good laws and commendable example, judge by providence, wisdom, and justice, and defend by prowess, care, and vigilancy. These things I can but dictate, of which your lordship knoweth best how to dispose. Ever as now remaining your honour's humble servant, Thomas Heywood.
Yes, that was interesting. A little more. I don't know. Was there slightly more grovel in that one than earlier? I don't know if that was just my imagination. The other one was just so much more compendious. That any arse licking was harder to read. Angela, you're saying things.
I'm just wondering, maybe they didn't pay up the ironmongers. Maybe they were a bit cheapskate. Could it all have been because of that? They've been nice as the haberdashers. They've got more money, haven't they?
Yeah, or maybe someone reminded him that he should be doing more grovelling, less compendiousness, more grovelly, please.
At some point in the last pageant, I think he referred to the former mayor as a scholar, to the last mayor. So it's possible that he felt a duty to be abstruse.
Maybe that's part of the scheme of things. Just to note that we're just wrestling with what Oakes it was. Yes, it is down as John, and I assume that's a relation and passing on from Nicholas Oakes, who was the earlier regular printer. So I'm assuming that's a familial connection passing down. Angela is nodding. I don't know. I think. I genuinely don't know. I don't know much about printers.
No, that's right. And what's interesting, because I did look this up because printers are my thing, and Rayworth, who's never printed one before, so it was interesting that it shifted. So I think Oakes must have died, who had normally been doing it, although we know there was a little blip when Gosson did it with the John Taylor. And then I think there's obviously been John Oakes has taken over the business.
In the same way as the Christmases, there was a bit of a gap before the Christmases resumed their service as it passed down through a new generation. So, yeah, there's an interesting little progression there. Eric,
I'm trying to decide if this is actually groveling or just like sort of a backhanded sort of an insult disguised as groveling, because he kind of goes, the learned, the dominion of the greatest magistrates, king and princes are perpetual, but then the lesser are, like you basically, aka magistrate. Sort of praetors, censors, and the like are only, they're just like for 1 year. We don't really need very much. But then he adds like the rest of it, which is a bit grovelly at the end.
Well, you can't ignore the fact that there is a king. They're quite more important than you in that. Anyway, we should get into some text. We should move on. It's quite a lot of text before we get to the text of an actual show on the water. So I will say, Eric, if you can read the next paragraph, Greg, the paragraph after, Angela, the paragraph after that, and then we'll go in a circle. Oh, Liza, yes, Liza can go to the come to the speculum or mirror, and then we'll pause briefly. I think, yes, once round each. Eric, Greg, Angela, Liza. Let's try that.
All triumphs have their titles, and so this, according to the nature thereof, beareth a name. It is called Londini, that is speculum more plainly. London's mirror, neither altogether unproperly so termed, since she in herself may not only perspicuously hold her own virtues, but all foreign cities by her how to correct their vices.
An antiquity should derive from Brute, lineally descended from Aeneas, the son of Anchises and Venus, and by him erected about the year of the world 2855, before the nativity of our blessed Saviour 1108. First called by him Trinovantum or Troynovant, New Troy, to continue the remembrance of the old, and after, in the process of the time, Kaya Lud, that is Ludstown, of King Lud, who not only greatly repaired the city, but increased it with goodly and gorgeous buildings. In the west part whereof he built a strong gate, which he called after his own name, Ludgate. And so from Ludstown, by contraction of the word and dialect used in those times, it came since to be called London.
I will not insist to speak of the name of mayor, which implieth as much as the greater or more prime person. Such were the praetors or praefecti in Rome. Neither were the dictators any more, till Julius Caesar, aiming at the imperial purple, was not content with that annual honour, which was to pass successively from one to another, but he caused himself to be elected perpetuous dictator, which was in effect no less than emperor. And for the name of ealdorman or alderman, it is so ancient that learned Master Camden in his Britain remembereth unto us that in the days of royal King Edgar, a noble earl and of the royal blood, whose name was Alwyn, was in such favour with the king that he was styled Health Cunning or Half King, and had the style of alderman of all England. This man was the first founder of a famous monastery in the Isle of Ely, where his body lies interred, upon whose tomb was an inscription in Latin, which I have verbatim thus turned into English. Here resteth Alwyn, cousin to King Edgar, alderman of all England, and of this holy abbey the miraculous founder. And so much, being tied to a brief discourse, may serve for the antiquity of London and the titles for mayor or alderman.
I come now to the speculum, or mirror. Plutarch tells us that a glass in which a man or woman behold their faces is of no estimation or value, though the frame thereof be never so richly decked with gold and gems, unless it represent unto us the true figure and object. Moreover, that such are foolish and flattering classes, which make a sad face to look pleasant, or a merry countenance melancholy. But a perfect and true crystal, without any falsity or flattery, rendereth every object its true form and proper figure, distinguishing a smile from a wrinkle. And such are the means many times to bridle our refractory affections. For who, being in a violent rage, would be pleased that his servant should bring him a glass wherein he might behold the torvity and strange alteration of his countenance? Minerva, playing upon a pipe, was mocked by a satyr in these words.
Oh, and give us the words of the satyr.
Non te decet forma istaic pone fistulas et arma capesse componens recte genus. That visage misbecomes thy pipe cast from thee, warlike dame. Take unto thee thy wonted arms, and keep thy cheeks in frame. But though she despised his counsel for the present, when after playing upon the same pipe in which she so much delighted, she beheld in a river such a change in her face, she cast it from her and broke it asunder, as knowing that the sweetness of her music could not countervail or recompense that deformity which it put upon her countenance. And therefore I have purposed so true and exact a mirror, that in it may be discovered as well that which beautifies the governor as deforms the government.
one thing more is necessitously to be added, and then I fall upon the shows in present agitation, namely that the Fellowship of the Merchant Adventurers of England were first trusted with the sole venting of the manufacture of cloth out of this kingdom, and have for above this 400 years traded in a privileged and well-governed course in Germany, the Low Countries, etc., and have been the chief means to raise the manufacture of all woolen commodities to that height in which it now existeth, which is the most famous staple of the land, and whereby the poor in all countries are plentifully maintained. And of this company his lordship is free, as also of the Levant or Turkey, and of the East India Company, whose trading hath been and is in these foreign adventures, who also who spent many years and a great part of his youth abroad in other countries. So, quite a lot of background there. I think the latter point actually was very interesting when we were talking about the Turkey Company and the East India Company, and the various trading that is going on there, which more of which is going to go increasingly wrong as time goes on and create all sorts of interesting problems. Any thoughts out of this explication of the title? I can't help but find it moderately amusing every time anyone says speculum.
Yeah, you can find it amusing.
Angela.
I think we see here the secret of why Heywood doesn't like music, never puts any music in. And it's because of this whole business, isn't it, with Minerva? Because music was supposed to be something you should throw away, and he's put this story in here. I think this is Freudian.
It's a slip. It's a Freudian slip,
is
is it?
Early for Freud. I realise that, but still.
That's all right. Yeah. And we get lots of all the old. It's actually a bit more of a return to form in the sense that he's constantly referencing Brutus and the lineage there and Britain's founder and the connection back to this noble line of Lord Mayors, and it's sort of more on point than we've been for a while. It is suitably compendious. Any additional thoughts? Because in a sense, again, we've not got any closer to actually seeing the show because we have been given no details about the actual show yet. We've only been looking at this particular text for 15 minutes. It's fine. We will get to some actual detail. Eric.
It's interesting that he sees music and basically pleasurable things. I don't know, something that beautifies the governor but deforms government. So basically, it's not necessary. It's sort of revels and pleasures and fun things are not meant to be here. Also, I can't imagine mocking someone in Latin. It's just, unless you, yeah.
It's Aristotle, isn't it, who writes about music in this way, that it deforms government, that you shouldn't have it. I think so. I think it's in Aristotle.
Might be Plato. He says that you can't have any kind of singing or poetry or music unless it's lyric or epic poetry that is designed to be religious / sort of reverent, if I remember correctly.
Yes, it has to be improving for the soul.
Yes.
It's definitely remember.
Okay. Let's improve our souls. Let's get some text. Greg has refreshed himself liberally. So I'll ask you to read the descriptors here coming up. So there's a paragraph coming up, Greg, and there's another one coming up after a speech in a moment. Liza, if you could be St. Catherine. It's been a while since we had St. Catherine. It's nice to have you back. I hope you brought your own wheel. And Eric, if you can read Mercury. I think it's Mercury coming up, the next speech that follows after St. Catherine. And we'll see whether we need to go any further. We may pause after that. So, let's have some water shows of some description. Oh, Greg, we have lost your sound. Cannot hear you.
Hello.
Yes, you're back. Lovely.
Now, the first show by water is presented by St. Catherine, of whom I will give you this short character. She was the daughter of King Costus and had the general title of Queen of Famagosta, because crowned in that city, being lineally descended from the Roman emperors, who, as she lived a virgin, so she died a martyr, under the tyrant Maxentius, whose empress with divers others eminent persons she had before converted to the faith. She rideth on a scallop, which is part of his lordship's coat of arms, drawn in a sea chariot by 2 seahorses, with divers other adornments to beautify the piece, the art of which the eye may better discover than my pen describe. And why she, being a princess and patroness of this company of the haberdashers, who only ruled on the land, should at this time appear upon the water, and without any just taxation to make that clear, she thus delivereth herself.
Great praetor and grave senators, she craves a free admittance on these curled waves, who doth from long antiquity profess herself to be your gracious patroness. Oft have I on a passant lion sate, and through your populous streets been borne in state. Oft have I graced your triumphs on the shore, but on the waters was not seen before. Will you the reason know why it doth fall that I thus change my element? You shall! When Triton with his pearly trumpets blew a streperous blast to summon all the crew of marine gods and goddesses to appear, as the annual custom is, and meet you here, as they were then in council to debate what honour they might add unto the state of this inauguration, there appeared God Mercury, who would from love be heard. His caduceus silence might command, whilst all attentive were to understand the tenor of his message, who thus spake. The sire of gods with what you undertake is highly pleased, and greatly doth commend that fair design and purpose you intend. But he beheld a machine from on high, which at first sight dazed his immortal eye, a royal ark, whose bright and glorious beams rival the sun's, ready to prove your streams, a vessel of such beauty, burden, state, that all the high powers were amazed thereat, so beautified, so munified, so clad, as might an 8th to the 7 wonders add, which must be now your charge. 'Twas Jove's own motion, that all of you attend her to the ocean. This notwithstanding, such was their great care to show that o'er you they indulgent are, that Neptune from his chariot bade me choose 2 of his best sea horses, to excuse his enforced absence. Thames, whose breast doth swell still with that glorious burden, bade me tell that Jove's command shall be no sooner done, but every tide he'll on your errands run, but hence to the land's end, and thence again back to convey your traffic from the main. My message thus delivered, now proceed to take your oath. There is no further need of my assistance, who on land will meet you, and with the state of greater triumphs greet you.
These few following lines may, and not impertinently, be added on to Jupiter's message delivered by Mercury, which, though too long for the barge, may perhaps not show lame in the book, as being less troublesome to the reader than the rower.
Dance in thy rainbow colours, Proteus, change thyself to 1,000 figures. 'Tis not strange with thee, thou old sea prophet. Throng the seas with Phorcus' daughters, the Nereids, and all the blue-haired nymphs in number more than barks that float or pebbles on the shore. Take Aeolus along to fill our sails with prosperous winds and keep within his gales. Tempestuous gusts, which was no sooner said but then done, for all the marine gods obeyed.
And we'll just pause there. Suddenly we get description. We get some detail as to what is actually visually going on. We get a sense of deja vu all over again. Riding on a scallop drawn in a sea chariot by 2 seahorses. And the speech itself even sort of says, "You've seen me before, but not on the water." Oh no.
Yes, and then Saint Catherine starts citing a lot of pagan gods, which... Yes.
And then you get these mysterious lines, and just, the few following lines may, and not impertinently, be added unto Jupiter's message delivered by Mercury. Which, though too long for the barge. So was it cut? And this is only where it exists? What does that mean?
As being, less troublesome to the reader than the rower.
Yeah, but...
Actually, this is brilliant, I think, because this, for the first time, gives you that sense of timing, doesn't it? Of how different things happen. And if you're about to come into the, I don't know, is it that they're coming on to land? There's something happening, isn't there, that means that they've got no time to put an extra bit of talk in somewhere.
Yes, well, this is the first part of the event. So we're going from the Guildhall down. They're getting onto barges to go to Westminster. So it's more them getting onto the water than the other way round, I think.
So in fact, then you don't want to have. So the rower couldn't hold it steady for somebody to be stood there speaking. Then perhaps.
Yeah. And it's yes, Eric.
I was going to say it's kind of like that play. I think it was Misfortunes of Arthur, where one of the actors changed the lines, you get it in the. I think it was in the prologue or some sort of random introductory note where the author goes, "Yes, and they didn't speak this the way I told them to."
Yes, he was quite miffed. He was very miffed. Well, we've had this note before of, this material should have gone somewhere else. And, when Antonio Monday was really miffed about, his Robin Hood bit had to be put in, he sneaks it in at the end, but it wasn't allowed to be in the main stuff. Anyway, we have more shows. So we've gone to Westminster, floated along to Westminster. The Lord Mayor's been sworn in. They come back to... Paul's, and this seems to all be happening in St Paul's Churchyard, precincts of which were much more extensive and enclosed than they are today. And so, Angela, I'm going to ask you to do the description. There's a few paragraphs of description coming up. No, actually, we'll alternate with Eric. Eric, you can have the second paragraph again here, Fermith, and then Angela, you can return again for the paragraph after. And then, Greg, could you do the speech delivered? That would be nice. And then we'll briefly pause before the third show or the fourth show.
Right.
So, Angela, Eric, Angela, Greg.
The second show, but the first by land, is presented by the great philosopher Pythagoras, Samius, the son of Monarchus, which being outwardly spherical and orbicular, yet being opened, it quadrates itself just into so many angles as there be sceptres, over which his sacred majesty beareth title, namely England, Scotland, France, and Ireland, concerning which number of 4 I thus read. Pythagoras and his scholars, who taught in his schools that 10 was the nature and soul of all number, one reason which he gave to omit the rest was because all nations, as well civil as barbarous, can tell no further than to the deanery, which is 10, and then return to their account unto the monody, that is 1. For example, from 10 we proceed to 11 and 12, which is no more than 10 and 1, 10 and 2, and so of the rest, till the number rise to an infinite.
Again, he affirmeth that the strength and virtue of all number consisteth in the quaternion. For beginning with 1, 2, 3, and 4, put them together and they make 10. He saith further that the nature of number consisteth in 10, and the faculty of number is comprised in 4. In which respect the Pythagoreans expressed their holy oath in quaternion, which they call tetractin, as may appear in these words. Per tibi nostre anime prebentem tetrada luro, juro, probably, I'm guessing. Luro doesn't make sense. Per tibi nostre anime prebentem tetrada juro, Naturae fotemque et firmamenta perennis.
For they held the soul of man to subsist in that number, proportionating it unto these four faculties: mens, scientia, opinio, sensus, the mind, knowledge, opinion, and sense. And therefore, according to that number, Pythagoras frames his speech, alluding to those four kingdoms over which his majesty beareth title.
The speech of the second show, delivered in Paul's churchyard. Sacred's the number 4, philosophers say, and bears an happy omen, as this day it may appear. 4 elements conspire, namely the water, earth, the air, and fire, to make up man. The colours in him bred are also 4, white, pallid, black, and red. Of 4 complexions he existeth solely: phlegmatic, sanguine, choler, and melancholy. His meat for several digestion gains, in stomach, liver, members, and the veins. 4 qualities corprimi within lie, which are thus titled: hot, cold, moist, and dry. He acts his whole life on this earthly stage, in childhood, youth, manhood, decrepit age. The very day doth afford him light, is morning, meridian, evening, night. 4 seasons still successively appear, which put together make a compleat year. The earth, with all the kingdoms therein guided, is into 4 distinguished parts divided. The 4 winds from the world's 4 quarter blow: Eurus, Favonius, Auster, Aquilo. All moral virtues we in 4 include, as prudence, justice, temperance, fortitude. Court, city, camp, and country, the 4 seas, which represent to us the 4 degrees required in every fair and flourishing land. Subtract but 1, a kingdom cannot stand. 4 colonels are in this city known, of which you, honoured sir, having long been one, and those 4 crowns, for so the high powers please, emblem the king's 4 sceptres and 4 seas. That glorious crown at which his highness aim. Thus is our round globe squared, figuring his power, and yours beneath him in the number 4.
The third show. The third pageant or show merely consisteth of antic gesticulations, dances, and other mimic postures, devised only for the vulgar, who are better delighted with that which pleaseth the eye than contenteth the ear, in which we imitate custom, which always carrieth with it excuse. Neither are they altogether to be vilified by the most supercilious and censorious, especially in such a confluence where all degrees, ages, and sexes are assembled, every one of them looking to be presented with some fancy or other, according to their expectations and humours, since grave and wise men have been of the opinion that it is convenient, nay, necessitous, upon the like occasions to mix seria eocis, for what better can set off matter than when it is interlaced with mirth? From that I proceed to the 4th. I mean, it's dripping with contempt, isn't it? Oh yeah, we've got to throw them a crumb, haven't we? Just throw them a bit there. But I was actually quite enjoying the second show. Everything's about a number 4. We've got a description of a globe that opens out into 4 kingdoms: England, Scotland, France, and Ireland. Yeah, that hasn't created any problems over time. What about the Welsh? Anyway, and yeah, and then how many different 4 things can we mention? So yes, I don't know who put in the chat, but yes, this one is definitely sponsored by the number 4. It's quite sweet in parts, and also just problematic in others. Any thoughts about pageant number two? We'll ignore the third pageant because it ignores us.
I want to know what these pageants were that Heywood hated so much.
It seems to be just some sort of. It seems to be Pan's people, as far as I can tell.
For U.S. listeners, Pan's people were an inexplicable dance troupe that appeared on the British show Top of the Pops, doing extremely weird synchronized movements in leotards or something, and quite a lot of prominent stage actors got their start as a member of Pan's people, like musical theater people, a lot of them. But yeah, it's the bit of Top of the Pops that you just watch and go, what?
Yeah, it's the bit of Top of the Pops when they don't have either the acts or what would have accounted for a music video at the time, so they would play the music over the random dancing.
It's a bit like a Soul Train line without the soul.
Anyway, we've gone off on this tangent for too long. Any additional thoughts about pageant number 2, Pythagoras, and his 4 things?
It is original.
Hmm.
We've never had a Pythagoras before, have we?
Don't think we have.
No, he's actually doing something original. So somebody's asked in the chat, but I would like to ask it of everybody now. Why? Why has he chosen Pythagoras?
Did he not just explain very clearly?
Has it got something to do with him?
Did he not just explain in great length?
Well, he tells us about Pythagoras, but why has he chosen Pythagoras?
I mean, it starts out as a metaphor for the four kingdoms of Britain: England, Scotland, France, and Ireland.
Forlorn hopes there. Anyway, sorry.
One day technology will exist to punch people through Zoom, and on that day Rob had better duck.
Sorry.
He has a duck.
I think that's called real life.
Sorry, I did interrupt you. I apologise.
Oh, not at all, not at all. Life is made up of interruptions. Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe it's grounded in tech. Maybe the globe just happens to split into 4 parts. Who knows?
I was going to say that there was I can't remember when it was, but one of the pageants by Monday had this, I don't know, something that was the 4 corners, like of the 4 points of the compass or something, with mermaids. I don't know, some sort of, yeah.
That's right, like a map. It was like a map, wasn't it?
Yeah, but where it was both. We were trying to work out if it was covered and then like or not, that kind of weird stuff going on. I don't know. Maybe it's a reference to that, or maybe he just like went for the number 4.
Maybe there is no reason. Maybe there is one. Maybe people in the outside world will know that. Put something in the comments if you have an answer to this question, and maybe Tracy will just to send us a message later and just go, it was this. And the answer will be there. Anyway, we need to go on to the 4th show. So I will ask Eric to start us off on the 4th show. Then Greg, and then Liza, if you can read the speech, please.
4th show. It bears the title of an imperial fort, nor is it compulsive that here I should argue what a fort is, a sconce or a citadel, nor what a counterscarf or a half moon and so on is, nor what the opposures or defenses are. My purpose only is to express myself thus far, that this fort, which is stilled imperial, defenced with men and officers, suiting their functions and places proper to such a muniment, doth in the moral include his Majesty's royal chamber, which is the city of London, for to that purpose was the project intended.
The speaker is Bellona, whom some held to be the daughter, some the sister, others the nurse of Mars, the god of war. Neither in any of these is any impropriety or aught that is dissonant from authority. because Ennio, whom is Bellona, implies that which putteth spirit and courage into an army, etc. Antiquity called her Duelena, that is the goddess of war, to whom their priests sacrificed their own blood, before whose temple the Facialis set a spear against some prime pillar thereof, when the public war was to be denounced. She was most honoured of the Thracians, the Scythians, and those wild and barbarous nations upon whose altars they used to sacrifice a vulture, which is a ravenous bird used to prey on dead carcasses and assemble themselves in great flocks after any fought battle. But this discourse made some period pertinent to the project in hand, and therefore I thus proceed to her speech.
Bellona's speech upon the imperial fort. This structure, honoured sir, doth title bear of an imperial fort, apt for that sphere in which you now move, borrowing all her grace, as well from your own person as your place. For you have passed through all degrees that tended unto that height which you have now ascended. You have been in this city, 'tis known well, a soldier, captain, and a colonel, and now in time's fair progress to crown all, of this metropolis, chief general. You of this emblem which this day we bring to represent the chamber of the king, are the prime governor, a royal fort, and strongly setted as not built for sport, but for example and defence, a tower supported by no less than sovereign power. The theologic virtues, the three graces, and charities have here their several places. Here piety, true zeal, study of peace, by which small mites to magazines increase, have residence. Now opposite there are to these, and with them at continual war, pride, arrogance, sloth, vanity, prestigion, profaneness, the contempt of true religion, with thousands more who assiduously wait this your imperial fort to insidiate. You may observe in the music of your bells, like sound in triumphs and for funeral knells, marriage and death to them appear all one, masking nor mourning cannot change their tone. Within our fort 'tis not so, whose fair pretence is to comply with the nature of offence. Errors she knows in low terms how to chide, great faults with greater noise are terrified. But she can load her cannons and speak loud to encounter with the arrogant and proud. What's further in your praetorship assigned, you in your London's mirror there may find.
And I'm going to infer bang.
Kaboom!
Because this is very similar to last year's speech with Mars. I'm just gonna, say that might be pretty much the same thing. Just possibly that. I'll just be reusing the same pageant. I don't know. Am I being unfair? Getting very high pitched here.
Well, last year it must have made quite a sensation. Perhaps this was a new set piece. Although we've had towers before. But we haven't had a fort with, like, defenses and stuff.
Yes, we have.
Or have we?
Yeah.
I mean, we had one last year.
It's not last year, it's the year before last. Because there was a plague in between.
There was an intervening year.
Because Mars was there was a whole thing, which was a fort, and everybody
was.
messed up in, I'm sure they were.
And
Yes.
we've had towers before. Towers generally, I'm going to say there's possibly an semi-established tower setup that's available. I do love that way he just goes. I don't need to explain what a tower is, do I? You've seen towers before, forts before. You don't need me to explain those. Yeah, you don't need me to describe things for you. It's in your head, surely. You just know what this stuff is. Yeah. So but we were saying how Pythagoras was sort of a bit new and a bit a bit different. I don't know. It's just Okay, the theme of the speech is different, but I'm sort of looking back at the astrologian last time, and I'm just sort of wondering whether actually there's actually a thematic or even costumey similarity between those. Even though the speeches are quite different, this one is doing different things.
This one is maths. I mean, that one was the maybe he's building up to having a whole pageant where all of these one-offs like are all going to turn up all together.
Yeah, that's that's next session. Next session, our final session on these. Will perhaps be like that. Maybe they won't. We need to conclude. There's a fifth show, and then there's the speech when his lordship is at night, as it were. So, Greg, I'm going to ask you to read the next paragraph. Then Eric, reading about Marcus Varro. Liza, the description of the pageant. Angela, if you could read the speech that comes up, and then I'll lead Greg into the final speech, which is a return to I think Pythagoras. So Greg, Eric, Liza, Angela, and then I'll do the descriptors that orbit around Greg again.
The fifth show, called London's Mirror. This beareth the title of the whole triumph. Of glasses pertinent to this our purpose, there be several thoughts, as optic, perspective, prospective, multiplying, etc. The presenter is visus, or sight. For what the mind is to the soul, the same is the eye to the body, being the most precious part thereof. Sight is the most sovereign sense, the first of the five, which directeth man to the study and search of the knowledge and wisdom. The eyes are placed in the head as in a citadel to be watchtowers and sentinels, for the safety and guiders and conductors for the solace of the body.
We read that one Marcus Varro was surnamed Strabo for the excellence and quickness of his sight, who from Libeum, a province in Sicilia, could distinguish and give an exact account of all such ships as came out of the haven of Carthage, which two places some hold to be more than 100 Italian leagues distant. Indeed, no man can better estimate the virtue and value of the sight than he that is made blind and wants it. Neither could I devise a more apt speaker to present this mirror than the sense of the sight, without which the purest crystal is of no use at all.
This pageant itself is decored with glasses of all sorts. The persons upon or about it are beautiful children, every one of them expressing their natures and conditions in the impresses of their shields, 8 of the prime of which, suiting with the quality of the optic sense, bear these several inscriptions: aspice, despice, conspice, prospice, perspice, inspice, circumspice, respice.
Auspice, the speaker. Behold me sight of the 5 senses prime, now best complying with the place and time, presenting London's mirror. And this glass shows not alone what she is, or once was, but that the spacious universe might see in her what their great cities ought to be, that every foreign magistrate from hence might learn how to dispose his optic sense. Aspice saith, look toward and upon desertful men, whom this age frowneth on. And despice, cast down thy powerful eye on the poor wretch that doth beneath thee lie. Then conspice, take counsel first, and pause with meditation, ere thou judge a cause. Prospice bids a look afar off, and view, before conclude, what dangers may ensue. Perspice wills, in sifting doubts, then scan the nature of the matter with the man. Let every cause be searched and duly sought. Saith inspice, ere thou determinest aught, circumspice saith, look about to immure so great a charge that all within be sure. considerate respice enjoins thee last, to cast thine eyes back upon all things past. For London's self, if they shall first begin to examine her without, and then within, what architectures, palaces, what bowers, what citadels, what turrets, and what towers, who in her age grew pregnant, brought a bed of a new town, and late delivered of such a burthen as in a few years' space can almost speak all tongues to her more grace than her cathedrals, temples now repairing. An act of true devotion, no man sparing his helping hand, and many, 'tis well known, to further God's house have forgot their own. Unto her outward shape I do not prize her, but let them come within to anatomize her. Her praetor, scarlet senate, liveries, the ordering of her brave societies, divine Astraea here in equal scale doth balance justice. Truth needs not look pale, nor poverty dejected, the orphan's cause and widow's plea find help. No subtle clause can make demur in sentence, a fair bearing and upright doom in every court appearing. Still to preserve her, so be it your endeavour, and she in you shall live forever.
I come now to the Linvoy, or last speech, when his lordship, after his day's long and tedious trouble, retireth himself to his rest at night, in which Pythagoras the speaker briefly runs over the passages of the pageants before expressed after this manner.
Speech at night. We to a valediction are confined, right honoured, and entreat you bear in mind what was this day presented. Your chief saint, a martyr once of the church militant, but now of the triumphant, bids you spare yourself this night, for at a world of care you are engaged tomorrow, which must last till the whole progress of your year be past. The sphere-like globe quadrated lets you know what prorex doth to the four sceptres owe. Your military honours, in your days of less command, the imperial fort displays, and London's mirror, that all men may see what magistrates have been and ought to be. Set is the sun long since, and now the light, quite failing us. Thrice honoured, sir, good night.
For the artists and directors of these pageants and shows, John Christmas and Matthias, the two sons of Gerard, their now deceased father, a known master in all whose sciences he professed, I can say no more but thus, that proportioning their works according to the limits of the gates through which they were to pass, being tied not to exceed 1 inch either in height or breadth, my opinion is that few workmen about the town can parallel them, much less exceed them. But if any shall either out of curiosity or malice tax their ability in this kind of art, I refer them to the carving of His Majesty's great ship lately built at Woolwich, which work alone is able both to satisfy mutation and qualify envy. Finished. Yeah, if you need to get through a tight gap, they can really, really micromanage that tolerance on low bridges. They're masters at it, absolutely. Weird. That's a really weird way of complimenting them. I don't think it's backhanded or anything. It's just a slightly weird way to talk about them as workmen.
Well, all the sculptures got through the gates. Maybe there were other years in which they did not.
Yeah, well, it wouldn't be the first time someone's built a set they can't get in a theatre. So getting them things through gates, I suppose, is quite important, yeah. And apparently they did some great carvings on His Majesty's great ship. I don't know anything about that, though I'm sure that will be relatively straightforward to know which ship it was that was recently built in Woolwich. That's quite interesting. It's interesting, even in the final speeches, it pointedly does not mention pageant number 3. I was just going through it, there's pageant number 1, there's pageant number 2, and 4 and 5. There we go. Absolutely refuses to give us any data on the third show. So, we have reached the end of this particular journey for 1637 on pageant number 5 there, which is glasses of all sorts. We've got 8 figures, 8 beautiful children. So it suggests that maybe on the previous pageant, 2 years previously, those 8 figures of Nemesis, etc., were children as well. So that's useful data to have. We do wonder, actually, that's one of those things of, is this speech, are these supposed to be done by children, or are they going to be, some of them occasionally, they look like they might be by adults. How do these divisions function? Is it in this case it might be children on the actual pageant itself, and then maybe the speaker here might be an adult. I don't know.
What was the name of that theatre company that were children? It was like an orphanage, but
there were several. Often they were run. Often they were run by church choirs, and the choir master would run a theater company that consisted of the choir boys, and those plays would contain a lot of singing to show off their talents. But there was a real vogue for boy theater companies.
Yes, you did. You had Children of Paul's, which I think there was some occasional hints of suggestions of actual direct connection between them as performers in some of the pageants much earlier on. I don't actually know whether Paul's is still going by the 1630s, and there's Children of the Chapel Royal as well, are the earlier two. They're the two I know about from earlier. We are very much further on from my knowledge base, so I genuinely don't know what the state of play with those companies is, because they disappear occasionally and then pop up again, and I don't know where we are. It's the 1630s. It's not my. I haven't got there yet. I'm still back in the 1590s. I'm it's very sketchy, my knowledge base here.
Right. Okay.
Someone's been finding out about this ship. What ship is it?
It was called the Sovereign of the Seas, and apparently it was one of the biggest ones built at the time. And it had, she had, sorry, yes, because that is how we refer to ships apparently at the time, and now I don't know, maybe, got stuck when they tried to launch the ship. It was quite fun to read about.
Yeah, launching ships is always a slightly hazardous business, and even more so then, I'd imagine.
They didn't build the ship, did they? They carved it. That's what it says. They did the carving on it.
Oh, yes.
It says the elaborately carved figurehead represented King Edgar on horseback trampling on the 7 kings. On the stem, that's the front bit, Cupid bestrode a lion, and on the forward bulkhead 6 emblematic statues were placed. The stern offered even greater opportunity for masses of elaborate carving and decoration.
So, very much fitting with their renowned skills and the skills of their father in carving there. So, that's closed off the session quite well, I feel, actually. That's getting a description of what something looks like. It's not from the pageant, but it's at least contemporaneous. That's quite a novelty. Any final thoughts from the room on these two texts? I've quite enjoyed the speeches. There's been some nice material in the speeches. I wouldn't say I've been blown away by them, but there's been some good solid work there. Just an awful lot of other stuff, of which I'm much less engaged with.
I thought the second one was better than the first one this time. I don't know what other people thought, but it had more about it. It was kind of more engaging than the first.
Yes, I liked the stage the metaphor of mirrors, and the last speech by Opsis, the personification of the sense of sight. I mean, how stoned do you have to be to come up with that?
Oh, actually, so tobacco has really got going now. So it's possible I mean, people were smoking obviously back in sort of like 1610, but now absolutely everybody does. So yeah, maybe that's it. He's on the wacky back.
Yeah, I mean, cannabis. You're right. Cannabis residue has been found in clay pipes from this era, right?
Yeah, I don't know that we know anybody who was smoking. We haven't. Okay, I worked on a big project on intoxicants. We couldn't find any cannabis on ships coming into the country. It was never listed as but there it is. So, but then it wasn't all the ships. It was only ships from 2 places.
I wonder if it would have simply been listed as tobacco of another sort, maybe tobacco with an adjective. But then, of course, they would have thought of that and taken account of it. Sorry, I'm just spitballing.
Nothing suggesting it at all. So, but also no coffee.
How did they focus?
Yes.
I mean, like we were transcribing all report books. No.
Eric, any final thoughts from you?
I'm just thinking about coffee now, just because like I read an article on it, like sort of how they'd like food forward in the time of the 1600s and 1700s on how they used to use charcoal as coffee. Anyway, yeah, random in coffee rather. Yeah, I don't know. This one was an interesting one. I still don't know what to make of the having Pythagoras turn up. It feels a lot like sort of, look, I've read a lot of books. Yeah, it kind of.
His was very listy.
Yeah, it feels kind of like sort of it's like the equivalent of Robin Hood for Monday, but like with Pythagoras.
Yeah, it's just he just keeps listing things in fours, and it's almost comic actually the way that's structured. I mean, we were talking about doing the Sesame Street thing with that, but it is really like that. It's just every line seems to be mentioning. Oh, here's another thing that comes in fours. And then it closes off literally the number 4. So yeah. Right, well, on that number, we will close the session. We are indeed 4. Greg had to leave a little early, so we do end with 4, which is a magic number. So, yeah, all that remains is to thank all these wonderful readers. Thank you very much, and goodbye. The number 4.